In today's video, we're taking a look at the latest trade talk around the NHL. GM Kyle Dubas spoke to the media today, kind of giving us a look into the future here ahead of the deadline for the Penguins, which could involve some key moves on some players that have been there for a long time. Not expected to see a core player move, but that could come in the summer. We're at a point where a lot of people are starting to actually talk about the future of Captain Sidney Crosby. Will he finish his career in Pittsburgh? Will he want to go elsewhere before it's all said and done? We also have the latest on Vladimir Tarasenko in Ottawa. Where might he end up if indeed he is moved ahead of the deadline? There's two investigations underway involving things in the Ontario Hockey League and Major Junior. We have a news from the waiver wire, plus a fine and against the Florida Panthers player, and several roster moves. All that and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here in today's video, including a couple of investigations which have popped up here today in the news, which we'll discuss here in just a few minutes' time. First up, we do have news from the Department of NHL Player Safety. They have fined Florida Panther forward Ryan Lomberg for elbowing, which occurred in a game last night, where they played against the Ottawa Senators. Picked up a 3-2 overtime win. Apparently there's an elbowing situation against Jacob Chychrun. He's been fined $2,000. I watched the game in its entirety last night, and I don't really recall that situation. I mean, I guess I did miss a few minutes here and there. I wasn't glued to the TV screen the entire time I was working as well. But yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly what happened. I don't remember seeing that particular situation, but Lomberg was fined. It must have happened earlier in the game because that's when I missed a little bit of the action. So we'll see. Obviously not a huge deal, but a fine for Lomberg. We do have more news from the NHL waiver wire. Yesterday we had Zach Sanford of the Blackhawks, Jacob McDonald of the Sharks. They were both cleared today. Nobody picked them up. And today we have on waivers Colin White of Pittsburgh. So far during his time with the Penguins, he's put up 0 points, unfortunately, in 10 games. Of course, he was signed to a two-way deal, so he'll go back to the minors if he clears. I suspect he will. Colin White's a clear case of a player who's had a ton of potential and just really fell off a cliff early in his career. I know he had a pretty serious shoulder injury. I don't know if that's the big reason or if there's more to that. Obviously, he had got off to a good start during his rookie contract with the Ottawa Senators. Started to really come around by the end of the ELC, and he got signed to a 6-year extension and ended up getting bought out a couple of years into it. Since then, he's did a year in Florida last year, but didn't stick. Obviously, didn't have a great season. And then this year, he had to go to Penguins camp on a tryout and get a two-way deal. So, you go from a 6-year deal, getting bought out, to a 1-year deal. Then you're on a tryout and you're not even, putting up any points anymore. It's like he was drafted with a lot of expectations and talent. Was a big part of Team USA when he was in the World Juniors. Yeah, it's hard to say what happened to Colin White, man, but he's a player that Ottawa expected to have a big part of their future, and it just fell off a cliff in a hurry. We also got a signing today. The New York Rangers today have extended forward Johnny Brodzinski on a 2-year contract. It's a one-way deal as well. Gets him $787,500, so $787.5 each season. That's his AAV. So that's a one-way deal for Brodzinski, who's been obviously up and down a lot, seizing his opportunity as of late to kind of try to stick it out and become a regular NHL player. Lots of other news and notes, including some roster moves to discuss quickly. Toronto Maple Leafs today announced that goaltender Joseph Woll has been sent to the American Hockey League on a conditioning stint. Of course, he's been out for quite some time with an ankle issue. I believe it was a high ankle sprain. Sheldon Keefe spoke to the media today as well and indicated that they were hoping Woll would have been ready for this about a week ago, but he wasn't quite feeling comfortable enough to go down. So now what the plan will be is he'll go down and get a couple of practices in with the Marlies, hopefully get a game in on the weekend, and then we'll see how he feels, is what he said. So no clear-cut plan to play one game and come back up. It really boils down to how things go. If he plays a game, does well, feels well, then he'll likely get recalled and be back on the NHL roster. Obviously, he's on LTIR right now. I would assume the Leafs in that case are going to have to go with a 3-goalie system. I don't really think they're going to want to put Marty Jones on waivers because that's what he would need to go down. I don't think he would clear. He's had his moments this year where he's had a few games that weren't great, but generally speaking, the overall body of work for this season it's been good for a number 3 goalie. He's filled in nicely for the bulk of the time. So be curious to see how the Leafs handle their situation between the pipes now that Samsonov's been back for a while and is, for the most part doing well, and Wall will be back soon, hopefully, from injury. Clearly, if things don't go well, if he doesn't feel well, then it could be a little bit longer before the recall happens and comes back off LTIR. But good, promising progress there for the young goaltender into Leafs. The Islanders have an injury situation with forward Casey Cizikas. Not quite clear on the length of time that we're looking at on that one just yet, but he was injured and will be out for at least a little bit of time. The Islanders haven't provided a lot of clarity there just yet. The Dallas Star reassign youngster Logan Stankoven. I was under the impression he may actually play last night, and instead the Stars sent him back before the game ever started. He was only on the NHL roster as a recall for about 8 hours. In total, it never got to play, so unfortunate for him. We'll have to wait to get him in their lineup. The Carolina Hurricanes, Freddie Anderson spoke to the media. It looks like he's getting a lot closer to returning, and it looks like it probably could be anytime within a week or a little bit better. So the Canes are going to be back to a situation where they're going to have a goalie situation again where maybe they'll have 3 goalies between Ranta and Kochetkov. Be curious to see how things are handled there. Obviously, they're going to want to get Anderson some playing time, make sure he's obviously good in that regard. The Kings had Victor Arvidsson get hurt again. Again, no real clarity just yet on what kind of injury timelines we're dealing with, but he just come back off LTIR after an extended stay there, so that's certainly concerning for sure. They also sent Jordan Spence down to the AHL. The Bruins today also confirmed defenseman Hampus Lindholm is going to miss the upcoming 4-game road trip. He is now listed as week to week with an injury. So again, that's a bad blow for a Bruins team that's had a bit of struggles lately. Obviously losing one of their top D, not going to help matters there. In New Jersey, Akira Schmid, goaltender, was assigned to the American Hockey League, and they recalled goalie Isaac Poulter. Not got a few eyebrows raised today, wondering what's up with that. Obviously, Vanacek is injured right now. Nico Dawes has been kind of running as the primary goaltender for the time being. To go with Dawes and Poulter, is this a case of them just, not having confidence in Schmid and willing to try something at this point? I don't know if Vanacek's necessarily going to be out long term, so maybe it's just a short-term way to get Schmid playing in the American Hockey League while Dawes handles the load at the NHL. Maybe Poulter's going to mostly sit on the bench. I don't know. It just got a lot of people talking, wondering maybe because we know the Devils have been heavily involved in trade talks as well around Markstrom or Saros or what have you. So, it's a curious move. We'll have to see what they follow that up with. In Vancouver, they made a couple of adjustments as well, recalling Jet Wu. To do that, they moved Dakota Joshua to injured reserve and Carson Soucy, defenseman, to a long-term injured reserve to create the necessary space for the recall. Now on to some other news. We get some very concerning news out of the Ontario Hockey League, of course, part of the Major Junior League in the CHL here in Canada. 2 separate news stories today, both involving investigations in court cases and upcoming here against these couple of different things. So let's first discuss the first one, which came from Rick Westhead and TSN. Former Ontario Hockey League goaltender Tucker Tynan, who was with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, is suing the OHL and I believe the team as well over mishandling of his shoulder injury, as well as insulting him with derogatory and racial slurs, and advising him to self-medicate for pain and pressuring him to play through an injury. Apparently, after suffering a shoulder injury, after dealing with, I believe, would have been like an athletic therapist, told him he wanted to go to the hospital because he thought he needed it. He had a separated shoulder, and they wouldn't take him. They tried to pop it back into place on their own. He said it was excruciating pain. Only give him a couple of Advil, and obviously there's more to it. Trying to force him to play through an injury like that, not really giving him anything that, medically, won't take him to the hospital. The racial slurs are a whole separate kind of can of worms there. He's 21 years old, just recently ended his junior career, so I'm not sure where that's going to go, but obviously those allegations are true. It's a really bad look for the Greyhounds Hockey Club there in the OHL, so we'll see where this court case might go in the future. Again, we hear a lot of cases of players being encouraged to play through injury and whatnot, and from his case, it sounded like he advised the team like he wanted some time off to be able to deal with the injury, and instead he was denied that and he was put on the active roster. So yeah, we'll see how those allegations hold up. At this point, I don't believe the OHL is going to open its own investigation since everything is before the courts now. So we'll have to monitor that situation. A bad look if indeed these allegations are true. And there's also an investigation that's been opened by the OHL into the Sudbury Wolves hockey team after what they're calling bounty accusations. So there was a January 18th game, I guess, between the Sudbury Wolves and the Barrie Colts. One of the Barrie Colts players laid a big hit on a Sudbury Wolves player. Common everyday play in the game of hockey. It was forward Nathan Villeneuve, and there was no call in the game, but one of his teammates stuck up for him, and there was a fight. So I guess by some accounts, the team on the other side of things here, the Barrie Colts, kind of probably considered it to be a non-issue, and it's been dealt with, right? I mean, you see that a lot. Big hit, the other team doesn't like it, they have a fight, and then at that point, you know, everybody's kind of moved on. And in this case, it sounds like the Wolves didn't necessarily move on. They had another game 3 days later, and the player who laid the big hit against Villeneuve was held out of the lineup as a precaution because that team in the Barrie side of it got word and wind that there was a bounty placed on that player and that the other team was going to be going after him. So I don't know how much, again, there is truth to this or not. It's an accusation that's pretty bad. I would hope that the coaching staff for the Sudbury Wolves wouldn't be doing something like that, whether it be the coaching staff or a parent or anybody really for that matter. Nobody should be doing that. It's especially in the case where it appears to be a situation like it was already dealt with. The team already responded on the ice. There was already a fight because of that hit. So I really hope it's not true, but we'll see where this investigation goes. And again, that's a couple of things that have really just kind of really drives home the fact when you hear about problems with hockey culture. It's these types of things that really make it bad. And unfortunately, a lot of the cases you see are at the junior level. And at this age, that's why I guess sometimes you do see things at the older level and the different levels of pro hockey too, is because a lot of these people are seeing these things and these behaviors, and they're taking them with them to the next level, whether it be on the coaching staff or bad player behavior or what have you. And these are different cases. These are almost on the teams. That's not so much player behavior, at least you wouldn't think, but just some really concerning stuff and stuff that really has no place in the game of hockey and shouldn't be something that you really should even hear about. But here we are. So we'll have to follow up on those stories once we know more, once those court case and investigation moves forward. On the trade rumor side of things here today, I want to start first because we're going to focus a lot on the Penguins. But before we do that, Ottawa Senators are getting a lot of attention here as of late. Obviously, again, out of the playoff picture. Could they make a run here and get themselves back in? I guess miracles happen, but it's, almost seems too little too late at this point. I expect regardless of how well they play down the stretch here in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see GM Steve Staios make some adjustments. Unfortunately, there have been some good positives to take away from this season, but there's also been a lot of not so goods as well, and there's definitely going to be changes made to get this team on the right track to take that next step forward that they were expected to take this year. Unfortunately, there are some players that are on expiring deals that could net the team a good return for the future, one of those being Vladimir Tarasenko. Now, there's also rumored to be mutual interest for Tarasenko to stay in Ottawa. He's been a good player for them, a good pro. We've heard Steve Staios talk a lot about wanting good pros. Like this team still has a lot of youth in it. And yes, a guy like Claude Giroux has been a de facto captain. Brady wears the C, but Giroux's kind of the go-to leader, so to speak. Tarasenko's been really good for them. I know there was some red flags and mentioned last offseason about what kind of character he brings, but I really think he's defied a lot of that and proved a lot to be untrue. He's been a real good leader and a good veteran presence for them while putting up some really good numbers. So because of that, there's interest from other clubs. He has a no-move clause, so he's going to obviously have a full say over where he goes. Now, Pierre LeBrun of TSN and the Hockey Insider believes there are some teams that he would waive for. It's also believed because of the recent change. We've seen Tarasenko change agents a couple of times, including just a few weeks back. And it's believed that if he is traded, he wanted to have a new agent in place to get himself an extension as part of that trade. So obviously he's going to be able to dictate where he goes because he has a no move. He's not going to waive it unless that future is there and certain that he can get the next deal and just kind of keep his family in one place for the next few years after going and, being a Blue for so long in St. Louis, going to the Rangers at the deadline last year, signing in Ottawa on a 1-year deal. I think he's kind of surprised himself how much he actually enjoys the city, and the whole, everything comes with being an Ottawa Senator. Of course, new ownership has made things a lot better there too. And, I honestly think a lot of people basically thought for sure is a 1 year and out for Tarasenko. And now, there is reports that there's mutual interest. A lot of that's probably going to boil down to contract. I think the GM, Steve Staios, is likely going to speak to Tarasenko and his agent, kind of get a feel for, if we do keep you, what's your next deal? What are you looking for? And they'll probably make a determination on, does that work for us? Does it align with our vision? Is the money right? If he wants too much money or too much term, maybe it doesn't work out. And if it's also going to boil down to, what are other teams offering? We're not going to trade them if the offer's not right. That's how Staios is looking at it. So at the end of the day, Pierre LeBrun believes the Oilers are one of the teams that he would waive for, as well as the Lightning. There are other teams that are reportedly showing interest too. Don't know how he feels about them. Would he go back to the Rangers if there's an option? Maybe. I don't know that there's going to be, but we'll see about that. Now, the Oilers, I don't think, have Tarasenko as their prime target, but if he might be number 2 or 3 on their list if a guy like Jake Guentzel, who we're going to talk about in a minute, doesn't work out for them. So obviously in the Lightning, another team mentioned. Now that source has been through the fourthperiod.com with Dave Pagnotta, where LeBrun has kind of mentioned Oilers having some interest, and they think he would waive for those clubs. So we'll see. I think it's going to be a pretty good price tag that the Senators are looking for, given how well he's played, and I wouldn't give up on a return just yet. Even if he is traded, could he come back as a free agent? That's possible too. Now the Penguins, as we know, are going to be a very fascinating team to watch down the stretch. Kyle Dubas spoke to the media today. Of course, they find themselves behind the 8 ball, a good chunk of distance away from a wild card spot. Sidney Crosby's having a phenomenal season, and yet here we are. It's not all on Sid, obviously. I don't think the Erik Karlsson experiment's quite worked out the way they hoped for what his potential would bring for the offensive side. The supporting cast hasn't worked out. And this team just isn't any better. Kyle Dubas came in, made a bunch of changes, including, the blockbuster deal to acquire Karlsson, and they're almost worse than last year. To be honest, they're further out of a playoff spot than they were. Last year, right down to the final game or two, they were within striking distance. They're already 9 or 10 points out as of today. So maybe it's other teams getting better, more so than them getting worse. Hard to say. Either way, it's not looking good for them. And Dubas, obviously in his comments, certainly made it sound like to me, I got the impression he's ready to make the team younger and ready to move on from Jake Guentzel to be a big part of making that happen. Although he did make it clear that, the play and direction of this team in the next couple of weeks is really going to dictate how things go, and didn't want to commit to anything just yet. But he certainly acknowledged the fact that team's not where they want to be. They need to get younger and all those things that we kind of expected here. So it's believed that all non-core players are available for the right trade. So you can pretty much take Crosby, Letang, Malkin, Karlsson, and everybody else could be had. Now, there's also a lot of talk about the future of Crosby, to some degree Karlsson too. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But when it comes to Jake Guentzel, obviously he's injured right now, so his stock's not really going up or down, but it's believed he'll be back shortly after the deadline, and there's still tons of interest. He appears to be the Oilers' prime target. So like I said, with Guentzel, if they get the right trade, that's their guy. That's what it looks like. If things don't work out, then they'll probably shift focus to being Tarasenko to plan B if he's still available. Or maybe there could be somebody else out there on the market too. But clearly, Kyle Dubas is going to be looking for a big haul in return here for Guentzel to set this team up in the future. It's believed Crosby, as I mentioned before, as much as he probably doesn't like to see his longtime line mate in Guentzel be moved out, I'm sure he doesn't have a lot to say over it, and I'm sure he understands from a business perspective that team's not winning. You got to do something different, right? Does it make sense to commit to another long-term deal for somebody not far off from age 30? It probably doesn't. in that case. But clearly, a potential mock trade to look at from the Oilers, which I've seen mentioned, which I believe would probably be pretty close to what it's going to take to get it done, will be including the Oilers' first-round pick in 2024, looking at a top prospect, perhaps a guy like Xavier Bourgault, maybe a guy like Warren Foegele to make some of the money part work. They may even need a second player money-wise as well. If they do, you're probably looking at either a defenseman like a Kulak or a Ceci, or perhaps, they might try to see if they can squeeze another young player out of them like a Dylan Holloway. I don't think the Oilers really want to move Holloway, but if they can trade for it and keep Jake Guentzel long-term, maybe they will. Or maybe Philip Broberg. I mean, Broberg was, commented on by Ken Holland saying he wouldn't be moved for a rental, but if they can get an extension done with Guentzel and they're comfortable that they can, then it's not going to be a rental. So we'll have to see where that goes, but it sure looks like that's kind of the prime targets there. Riley Smith's another one to watch. Some talk, maybe could he go back to Vegas? Obviously, would have to have salary retained to have a chance to make that work because they're so tight. You got to wonder about goalie Alex Nedeljkovic. Lots of teams out there looking for goaltending help. Marcus Pettersson. Would he be of interest? But, I think Dubas is open to just about anything. But a lot of people talking, for the first time ever, I can't believe the conversation we're having, is Crosby going to finish his career in Pittsburgh? It's been brought up on multiple podcasts, multiple top-notch NHL reporters and insiders. Nobody's saying Crosby's going to be traded, and I'm not here to say that he is today either. But just for the first time ever in his career, because he's entering the final year of his contract next year, question marks arise. What does the future hold for Sid? And will he finish his career as a Penguin, or could he decide, you know what, maybe next year I'll come back, I'll finish the final year of the contract, and if we're not trending towards being a playoff team, could he be dealt? Like, we're talking probably a good year out, I would think, unless it happened in the summer. Crosby, I don't think is going to go anywhere unless Crosby wants to. Obviously, we know he has trade protection built into his contract. You're not going to trade a guy like Sid just for the sake of trading him. But at the same time, would Dubas, I'm sure you got to think Kyle Dubas would have had this conversation with him at least by now, saying, listen, how are you feeling? Do you still see yourself finishing your career as a Penguin? Do you have any interest to want to try going somewhere else? Obviously, if Crosby was traded, he would bring in a huge haul to the Penguins organization. Some people think he might want to finish his career as a Montreal Canadian because he grew up a Habs fan. I believe his dad was drafted by the Habs way back. His dad was, I believe, a goalie, and I don't think he ever played professionally, but he was drafted. And then you have, the possibility, would he want to go be with his buddy Nate McKinnon? Would he go to the Avs for a short stretch? But Crosby's playing high-level hockey at age 36. He's got one more year in his contract, but it's no signs of slowing down, no signs of wanting to call it a career. He could easily probably play another 3 or 4 years. I would have no doubt, would not be surprised at all. And, like I said, for the first time we're having those conversations. I don't think we're going to get any kind of immediate clarity on that. But by the summertime, I think we will, because Crosby is eligible for an extension. And I would suspect that Dubas, like I said, I would have already had some conversations to see where his feelings, his heart is at. And they're going to want to get an extension done this summer if his plan is to stay and remain and finish out a career Penguin, which I know is probably important. Based on what he said publicly, it sounds like he wants that and it's important to him. But do you know that Sid is an ultra competitive guy, and is he going to want to finish out his last 3-4 years of his career on a squad that's not making the playoffs and doing more losing than winning? You think that would really get at him? So, you got to balance out that part. I know he's got a couple of cups, and you could say, well, he's accomplished everything there is to accomplish. What does he care? Because Crosby's just wired different. He's one of the most competitive people you'll ever meet and never know. And I just know that I can see that bothering him. But at the same time, is being a lifelong Penguin more important? And how can he balance that? Will Crosby finish his career a Penguin, or will this year be the beginning of a teardown, where we see the current core of Crosby, Malkin, Letang all slowly kind of work their way out? You have to wonder. Crosby's the next big domino here because of the contract, and we'll have our answer, I think, sooner than later. Let me know your thoughts on today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.